Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Savage Goose Show. I'm Goose, and on this show, we talk about all things Savage Worlds in the past week and then dive into a main topic. Today, we're going to talk about why Savage Worlds is unbalanced, and that's okay. The word might actually be imbalanced. I was looking up the difference between like unbalanced and imbalanced, and I think the word might be actually imbalanced here. But we'll talk about why that's a fun thing later. Real quick though, if you're seeing this as a little bit different than usual, that's because we're trying a different software. We are trying to use Riverside.fm instead of StreamYard. There's just some changes, so we're going to try a new software for streaming. We'll see. We'll see how this goes. I'm not positive how this is going to work. There's not definitely as many options in Riverside for streaming that it was in StreamYard, but the uploading features the recording features are a lot better in Riverside. So we'll see how this goes. Hamster Doom says maybe disbalanced. Disbalanced might be it. That might be it too. I don't have to do like a word comparison, get some etymology going. But nevertheless, we're going to dive into the news of the week, and then we're going to do a Let's See Spotlight, talk about some Kickstarters, and then we're going to talk about why imbalance is fun. So here we go. So first off, the Savage Pathfinder. Actually, let me make sure that's actually coming over. Yep, it's working. Cool. Savage Pathfinder sale for the month of November is going on. Everything on Pinnacle's website for Savage Pathfinder, except for the Advanced Player's Guide 2 and the Bestiary 2, are 30% off. That's both the PDF versions and the hardcover versions, or the software, the physical versions, the print versions. That's where you go, print. So if you're interested in getting any Savage Pathfinder stuff that you haven't gotten already, this is a great time to do that while it's 30% off. Pick that up at Pinnacle's website. There's a link down below. There's another sale happening though, and that is the Vlog Friday VTT sale over on Pinnacle, over at PEGInc.com. There's a link down below. This Friday, from November 26th to Thursday, December 5th. So we got like a week actually going on, and that actually starts today. So actually, it's not just this Friday; it's whole week. You can get 40% off all of your VTT items if you use a VTT like Foundry or Roll20, or if you want to do any sort of DIY VTT stuff. There's some resources you can get for that. If you want to get any of that for any of your Savage Worlds games, you can get that for 40% off from Pickle's website now. So go ahead and go take a look over at that. Kickstarters ending Thursday, December 5th. So again, ending next Thursday on December 5th is the Savage Worlds Rifts for Savage Worlds. There we go. Rifts for Savage Worlds Europa book. That Kickstarter has been going on for a bit now, and we're coming into the last week of it. So go ahead, and if you're interested in picking up this book, go ahead and check that out. The link is down below for that as well. So yeah, just go check that out. We have a couple Kickstarters coming up in the next year. I think we're going to be seeing a slowdown right now with all of the Savage Worlds things. With Christmas and the holidays, we're going to be seeing as many Kickstarters going on because, we're going to be getting ready for the holidays. People aren't going to be spending money on a product they're not going to get in time for Christmas. So we're probably not going to see as much until the new year. But coming in the new year will include the Secret World North America for the Secret World RPG. So I got that up there. That's from Star Anvil Studios. They'll be doing a 5e and a Savage Pathfinder, or Savage Worlds, not Savage Pathfinder, a Savage Worlds version. So look forward to both of those, and depending on what you're interested in. Obviously, I'm interested in the Savage Worlds version, so we'll see how that comes next year. Coming from Table Cat Games, this is Monster Trucks, Long Haul into the Worstlands. This is a setting about playing as truckers who are various different monsters, vampires, werewolves, mummies, and the like. Seems really interesting, very unique. I'm very curious to see how that goes. That'll be coming in the next year as well. So hopefully we can see that from Tailcat Games. I'm looking forward to getting my Street Wolves stuff soon. So I'm actually not thinking about that. There's very similar thing. You got monster truckers who are on the road and they're monsters, and you have street wolves. So you have the road, it's a street, wolves. There's a connection there, probably not. Also coming next year is going to be the next adventure for Vermilium. That is the Sick and the Dead, coming next year on Kickstarter. So look forward to that as well. I'm looking forward to getting into that. And actually leads us into this month's spotlight for our Ace and Swag Licensee Spotlight for Vermilium. So Vermilium is one of my something I really enjoy, and I've actually just started enjoying it even more. My wife and I began doing, I'm not going to call it a solo play because obviously there's two of us. I'm going to call it a duo play. We're not doing the game master and player kind of like couplet play or duet play. Instead, we're going to do where we're both playing as players and we're using the Mythic Game Emulator to kind of simulate our GM, asking questions and trying to figure out what's going on, and doing that more of a shared story. But we both made characters not last week, I think it was like 2 weekends ago now. She made an aquatic elf who is got the hindrance to be the bloodlust hindrance, which basically makes her into a vampire. So she's got a arcane background as a vampire, but she's also got this some pretty major hindrances because of it, and that was kind of really cool to see. I personally made myself a obese Sasquatch, so not only am I pretty large for being a Sasquatch, I'm also a really obese Sasquatch, so that's fun. And unfortunately, though, I only have like a D4 in a shared language, so our communication as characters is very broken. So that has been a little difficult for us to communicate because I'm just like fish, eat the whole time to her until we get to some Sasquatches, in which case she can flip it around and she can try to speak my language. Except for she doesn't speak any Sasquatch, so never mind. Anyways, it's been fun. I'm looking forward to playing more as we go through playing those characters together in this setting of Vermilium. And yeah. One of the cool things I really do like about this, though, is the way that they do arcane backgrounds, or at least a few of the arcane backgrounds, specifically the vampire one, where it is a hindrance that you have to play up being a vampire, but it does get you some benefits. Arcane background. Almost all the powers are touch only, or sorry, self only, so it kind of limits them a lot, but which completely makes sense if you're just doing like I have the abilities of a vampire through having different arcane background powers. So really cool. I also was really enjoying the weapons. One of the things I did have a little bit of struggle with is I realized that because I was going for like a weak Sasquatch, a Sasquatch that didn't have a lot of strength, my default strength, which is a D8 for Sasquatches, is not enough to use a lot of weapons. Or weapons are made at least for Sasquatches because they're bigger. They can't really use weapons made for smaller, more size 0 creatures as easily. They get a penalty for that. So looking at the Sasquatch weapons, all the Sasquatch weapons require like a D10 in strength, I believe. And yeah, they all require D10 in strength. So I actually had to up my strength so I could actually use any of the Sasquatch weapons at all. But I did want to be some sort of warrior, so I had to do something there. All right, so that's what I like about that. And from there, we're going to go ahead and talk about why imbalance is fun. Let me go this over here. Why imbalance is fun. This is started out as this was a video that Tales from Elsewhere did. That's another YouTube channel talking about an RPG that they're building, but they talk a lot about game design things, things they want to talk about for game design. And one of the things that they talked about was this idea that balance is boring and symmetry is boring. So and we're going to talk about that in relation to Savage Worlds and why balance, symmetry, and Savage Worlds and how that kind of goes. So let me go and stop my screen share real quick. There we go. Now you guys can just see my face. Good thing or bad thing, who knows? Pull this over here. There we go. So if you're just joining us, welcome back to Savage Goose. On this show, we like to talk about different things in the Savage Worlds community and talk about Savage Worlds in different lights and talk about just kind of different topics within Savage Worlds. And today we're talking about balance, imbalance, unbalance, disbalance, whatever you want to call it. And that's what we're going to be kind of discussing today in that connection to Savage Worlds. So first, I want to go over some terms and what we talk about first as balance versus symmetry. And we're going to be talking about balance and symmetry in 2 different lights. One in the light of combat, of the balance between the enemies and the player characters, but you also want to talk about balance in relation to balance between characters themselves and kind of how that affects game balance overall. And then we're going to talk about symmetry. Symmetry is definitely something that's not... So yeah, we'll define symmetry, but we'll also talk about that in the light of symmetry of enemies versus the players, and then symmetry between players as well. So balance specifically is referring to the numerical equality amongst options available to the characters, meaning that no matter what options are chosen, they get the same kind of damage output or result output, no matter like really what options you have. So if you're thinking about in D&D terms, if you're a fighter or if you're a rogue, that you basically do the same amount of damage, they'll maybe do it differently. Maybe it's a sneak attack, whereas the fighter does 2 attacks, and the average damage per round might be about the same. So talking about that in one light. And then we have symmetry, which is that there is an even availability of options and decisions available to players, meaning that we all have all the players basically have the same options, regardless of class, which we're not really worried about in Savage Worlds, but depending on, and we'll kind of talk and how that affects Savage Worlds itself. One of the things that Peter from Tales from Elsewhere talked about is that the game or the edition D&D that was the most balanced and the most symmetrical was actually 4th edition. And one of the things he didn't say it was bad, which I know a lot of people will say, 4th edition is bad, blah. But he does kind of suggest, I think, kind of like under the radar, suggest that maybe that's why 4th edition was not one of the most fun versions of D&D. I think there's some other reasons as well. But for the most part, there was a lot of symmetry and a lot of balance between all the characters, all the classes. They all did very similar damage output. They all had a very symmetrical abilities. Maybe all the abilities were trapped differently, I would say. I mean, some of the examples he showed, they all had like basically different trappings, but they all did essentially the same amount of damage and had the same amount of effect. And really would, in Savage Worlds would have been the same power, essentially. Clipping issues. Well, here, let me turn down my mic just a little bit. And let me know if that makes anything. Grimwell Talk says he's not. All right. It's just you, Peter. Or maybe, I don't know. We'll figure it out. Okay. So the biggest problem. So, sorry. Let's go ahead and come back. So first, let's talk about balance between let's talk about balance between monsters and characters. Actually, it's really hard to figure out where to start. I had some ideas on where to start, but now I'm questioning myself. Let's talk about balance between players. Player balance and player symmetry. Look at balance. Characters are going to be very different in Savage Worlds. One of the things I love about Savage Worlds, one of the reasons I love it so much, is that Savage Worlds does not assume that all characters are going to be combat focused. You can play a character who is not focused on combat at all. Maybe they're a hacker and they just worry about hacking. Maybe they are a newspaper writer and they're just a journalist and they're just working on their next article and they don't have any way to fight, but they have someone who can with them. Maybe in your party you have the getaway driver and the person who can shoot a lot of guns, and then you have someone who's just really sneaky and is able to steal everything. And it doesn't necessarily assume that combat is going to be the same for every player. So we don't have balance. Savage Worlds doesn't assume balance amongst characters in Savage Worlds. And so with that means that we also, when we look at balance between, I'm sorry to talk about balance between monsters in combat and for combat purposes between characters and our monsters as game masters. But before we get there, I'm going to talk about symmetry. One of the nice things about Savage Worlds is that for the most part, there is actually a lot of symmetry in Savage Worlds. Every character can wild attack. Every character can desperate attack. Every character can try to perform a test. Every character can multi-action. There is a lot of different options that are given to all the players to do different things. Now, are you going to use every single option? Probably not. If your character is not meant for combat, you're probably going to do more tests. You're going to focus on more of the test route when you're in combat. Or maybe support roles inside combat. If you are a melee, someone who does a lot of melee damage, maybe do a little more wild attack, maybe do a little more desperate attack, and you're going to be using those options, and you're going to figure out which of those options is good. Are you okay with becoming vulnerable? Are you free to just go vulnerable again and use wild attack more often? Or are you having a really hard time hitting that guy, so you need to do, desperate attack? There's more options there. Especially, and then when it comes to shooting, you got your called shots, you can try to go for more raises, a raise and get the extra damage. You can aim and try to ignore some of those penalties. There's more options for kind of every person who's trying to do different things. On top of that, you can also take edges to get even more options. I think there's a lot of options that are symmetrical, but there's also more options specifically for people who are going for certain play styles. If you want to go for a two-handed weapon master, you can do that, taking the ambidextrous edge and also maybe taking the two-fisted edge. If you want to be a dual-wielding shooter, you can take the two-gun, I think it's called two-gun kid, and take ambidextrous as well. If you want to be someone who can like do a bunch of damage all in a sweep attack, you can take sweep. If you want to be someone who's really good at testing people, you can take different things to make you better at testing and taunting people. You can use. It's just a lot of different options throughout that, and it's all very symmetrical, right? So there's a lot of options that are available to every player, but the nice part is that not everyone is going to take every option, right? Every player is going to focus on different options, and those options aren't necessarily competing with each other for the same space in each character build. Because one of the things that is annoying when we see symmetry and balance is when the game becomes homogenous, when all characters have very similar things, and it can kind of become boring, and basically all of the different options become not special. They're not special anymore because everyone's doing them. I'm seeing this a little bit in our games with our Savage Pathfinder games, where almost everyone is doing a wild attack. So wild attack doesn't feel quite as special as it used to. Now, one of the things we've started doing, I've noticed in like our last game, is starting to use Desperate Attack a little bit more. I started using it, and so my players started actually thinking about, oh, you know what? Maybe I should use Wild Attack in this situation, because there was a lot of, or Desperate Attack in this situation, because there was a lot of other options that they felt like, there was a lot of penalties that I wanted to try to avoid. So there's that fun piece there. And then we didn't even talk about casters, who have a whole bunch of different options they can do because of how much variety there is inside of powers and spells. So let me just try to take a look at my notes real quick to make sure I got everything I wanted to talk about here. And so kind of coming back then to balancing combats. When you're balancing a combat, you are assuming a standard level of damage output. It assumes that all players have a certain level of balance amongst themselves, and it assumes some sort of like optimal damage output standard for the rank of the character. And one of the things I love about Savage Worlds is that characters are just not cookie cutter. Characters can be non-combative and still be able to do something in the game, but they may not be doing damage. So even if a player can do damage, maybe that is not what they're focused on in their build, and so they can still compete in combat, but you can't assume they're going to do X amount of damage in that combat. And so what then happens is that we can't really balance our enemies around what we think players are going to be able to accomplish. And instead what we have to do is just focus on the narrative of the game and the monsters and the enemies that we are putting in our combats instead. And because players may not want to do combat, maybe they want to avoid combat at all costs, and they're going to do it in a different way. Maybe they're going to go about things in a way that doesn't involve combat. But we still want to gotta be prepared for it, because while players like combat, that's going to be it's a fundamental piece, I think, of most tabletop role-playing games, with the exploration and the social encounters, and then the combat encounters. But we have to allow the players, based on what they've built, to kind of make their own decisions in that way, and that allows them to explore that imbalance amongst their party members, to do things in a different way depending on what's going on in the situation. Okay, so let me get a few other things here. And so that really makes it why you can't really balance encounters, because you can't assume that every player is going to be doing damage, nor that they're going to be doing an X amount of damage every turn. And instead, what you should do is just focus on the narrative aspect. And also, when you do try to balance things, what you end up doing is you start cookie cutting your enemies to try to balance them. And you kind of just end up trading the narrative aspect of the game for mechanics that may not be needed, or at least I should say combat mechanics that may not be needed. when you could be focusing more on the the social conflict. One of the things I'm going to try really hard to do in my next game is when they approach the big bad evil guy of the book we're running, is try to allow for some more social dynamic, some discussion between the players and the big bad, so that they can actually understand kind of reasoning and why. It probably is, it's still going to end up in a combat, but at least they can explore that. And if I'm honest, I haven't done any balancing for this monster and the encounters we're going to have, and the players, which are only 3 of them in our pre-written game that we're doing of the Rise of the Rune Lords, they're still handling everything just fine. All right, so what other options do we have? So I mentioned edges. People, your characters can also do different weapon choices. They have different trappings they can do. And one of the things I like about the different edges, I talked briefly about edges, is that a lot of the edges aren't just always on. So looking at the sweep edge, that sweep edge is a choice that your character can make to do, but they're not going to always choose to sweep. Your character might be able to, wield 2 weapons, but maybe they aren't going to always take 2 actions to fight. Maybe they have another thing another action they want to do. And what this means is that because it's unbalanced, because we're not looking at balance, we're working about symmetry, is that during a course of combat or a game, characters are going to take different options at different points, and different combats are going to have different options taken. The characters are not going to usually find like, okay, I'm always going to do this. I'm going to do this, then this, pass turn. I do this, pass turn. It's not going to be just this repetitive cycle. Characters are going to be able to do more interaction with their environment, with the combat, and handle different situations differently for every monster and combat encounter they have. So let me go ahead and take a look over the chat to see what you've all been saying, because I'm sorry, I've been getting in a groove and I want to see what y'all saying. Let's see here. Clipping issues. Nope. Okay, cool. Just reading through here. Vinkel says, had a nightclub singer and a street thug for a noir game. Both have role a bit different. Yeah, both of them are. Yeah, so if you're doing a noir game and you have a nightclub singer and a street thug, they're going to play very differently inside of combat. The night singer probably isn't going to be very good at, but they might have more charisma or persuasion ability to try to talk someone down or to be able to test someone in a different way. Grimmaltuck says, running away is not used enough IME in your experience. Yeah, running away, I think that's true of not just of Savage Worlds. I think that's true of any tabletop role-playing game. People seem very reluctant to run away. And I think that's even more so where you should in Savage Worlds, because in Savage Worlds things are even more inherently unbalanced. One of the things we did not talk about when it comes to unbalance, because I was focusing on like balancing via options, is that Savage Worlds is inherently super swingy because of the acing damage. I think we had twice last game we played that players got over 30 damage. I think one of the big bads got over 30 damage as well. I'm pretty sure I took out a player in one hit by accident last game. He got back up, he's fine. His arm's broken, which is awesome. He'll get it healed later, I'm sure. But that kind of thing can happen where he's just like, you're good to go, and then all of a sudden, now you're on the ground. So yeah, running away might be a thing that you might need to look out for. Let's see here. Something about over the top. I don't know what that is. Sorry, guys. Peter and Hamster of Doom are getting are nerding out here. Let's see here. Peter says, I think something that helps other players understand the options is having a character who, with no fighting or shooting, make a huge impact in an encounter. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I I'm trying to do my current D&D game, the game that I'm not running it. It's someone's running it for us. It's once a month, and I found a class from the Adventures of Middle Earth 5e book. It's a scholar class. They have some healing ability, but right now I have no ability to really help in combat except for to take the help action. So every turn last game, and this was one of those things we talk about, like monotony. My character just does not have any options to do anything in combat except to just help. I could punch someone. We don't have any gear right now, and even if I did have gear, I am only proficient with like simple weapons, so it's not like I can do a whole lot. Whereas in Savage Worlds, if I could make a character, if I was playing this in Savage Worlds, I could make a character that could have a huge impact on the game without having any combat abilities for sure. Peter then also mentions the nerd that can't fight who is able to make numerous enemies shaken or worse through tests or taunts. Yeah. Looking at like an ETU game, you can easily make a character who has no, for the most part, you should not have a character that really should have the ability to, shoot or fight really. Maybe like one character who took karate growing up. One of the things I find that even with my players, they all took some level of fighting for, whatever reasons they could come up with. Because they want to be able to fight. And that's fine. You should understand what your kind of game your players do want to play and, make the game that they want to play. So if they want to be very, doing a lot of fighting, that's fine. But also they should make sure that they know what kind of game they are getting themselves into when you are starting one as a game master. So let's see here. The balance that player brings to an encounter tends to be much better than a solid damage dealer. If you can hit a group with a test and get a free reroll from edge, that's fire. Yeah. There's some really cool features or edges out there that allow you to like do some really crazy stuff with tests and taunts that I don't think my group has fully explored how crazy these can be. Binkle says test and support are hidden combat options that is harder for new players to get around. Yeah, it's one of those things I don't think newer Savage Worlds players, I don't think fully think through. I think it's for players who are very new to tabletop role playing games in general. I think they're much better at it because they're like, they maybe they look at their character sheet and they go, oh, I don't have anything. What can I do to help here? And you're like, oh, you can do this. And like, or they'll say, one of my favorite things to do is just tell me what you want to do narratively, and I'll tell you what the mechanics are to do to accomplish that. And I much prefer that method to teaching new players to play the games because I'd much rather they get the focus on the narrative side of things and then be like, cool, yes, you can do that. Here's how we're going to rule this, and here's how you can. So just roll this and this. Here's what bonus. Great, that's awesome. So you kind of just move on. So much rather have that focus on the narrative play. Robert Rouser gives you a medium blast template. So I was looking through all the things here. Yes, I did read your arm wrestling comments. I didn't read them out loud, though. It's fine. Yes, and you can always push someone. Yeah. Actually, I didn't mention that option either. Those great grappling options in Savage Worlds as well. You can push people as well. There's some like those are options I didn't even think about when I was writing this, and that's just on top of all those other options we talked about. Yeah, you could grapple people, you could push them, and one of the things that I think is really interesting is that the way you want to, if someone wanted to like do like a fighting test, or you could, or how say this, if you wanted to say that you're going to try to trip up someone, there's a lot of different ways that you could do that and talk about how you're doing that. Are you doing that as a support role to someone, or are you doing it as a like a fighting test or athletics test? And you could do it both ways. And both those options are very legitimate options that have different outcomes. And I talked about this with my players. We were hanging out. I was hanging out with two of my players this past weekend, and we were talking about like doing tests versus support roles. If you do a support role, you're going to get a max of +2 to someone, but all you have to do is get a 4 or higher for a support roll, right? So you get a 4 on your roll, and then you get, if you get a raise, that's +2. Perfect. That's a lot. That sounds pretty good. Or you can do a test where it's opposed. So someone has to roll against you. You don't know if they could get higher than 4. It means it might be a little more difficult for you, but you might be able to make them vulnerable, which will give that +2 to your allies and all allies who are maybe attack them. Or, and on top of that, you could also even shake them if you get high enough over that opposed roll. So there's a much bigger benefit for tests, but because it's opposed, there's a lot less, guarantee that you're going to, a lot less, a lesser chance that you're going to get that, that roll high enough to actually taunt them and test them. Perfect. Yeah. I have no fighting roll, but I use athletics to support roll to get down on my hands and knees behind the enemy. If I remember, then gets a bonus to their push as the bad guy trips backwards. Perfect. That's it. And that works really well, actually. So there's so many amazing options in Savage Worlds, and all the options are available to all the options. Like a lot of these options we talked about are available to all the different kinds of characters, but different ones are going to be better in different situations for different kinds of players. And it's about what your character is good at, what they're going to be able to do, and kind of how much what option makes sense for them, I guess, essentially. So, and what options make sense for them is not going to be the same from character to character, and from combat to combat, situation to situation. Cool. Peter Saloom says, a fun exercise is to watch a scene in a movie and outline what the actions are in terms of Savage Worlds rules. Ooh, I like that. Is that like a fun exercise for like game masters, or do you think that's good for players too? I can see the benefit for both, but I think for game masters that might be even more fun, just because then they can show that off to their players. But actually, now I'm thinking about, like, I always knew you could do the push thing, but now I'm like, oh man, I'm trying to imagine like my extras trying to do that, and that'd be very interesting. I did start using support roles for a lot of my extras recently. Like extras I knew, have a D6 in fighting, and therefore it's really hard for them to hit our characters with like 7 parry. So what I've started doing is having some of the other extras roll support roles to help the either support roles or tests to help the other extras actually be able to land hits. Pierce Hamster Doom says Hamster Doom says the game designers and writers especially should also watch TV shows and movies and figure out their games, figure out how their game would accomplish the same goal. Yeah. So one of the things that if you're watching this and you're like, okay, how do I keep track of all these different options? There is a couple really nice guides that kind of go over the different options that you can do. One is made by Pinnacle. It's things like the combat reference chart sheet. And then there's another one that is made by somebody on Reddit, I can't remember who, that basically lists off, like, what's the problem you're having, and then different situations, and then gives recommendations based on like what situations you're seeing, how to handle it. Should you call shots? Should you aim? Should you use a wild attack? Should you use desperate attack? All those different options right there on the sheet for different combat options. I mentioned that in a video. I think it's I can't remember which video it was. I've a couple of videos where I've mentioned it, but I've definitely specifically talked about it in one particular video. It might be my 5 combat tips video, so check that out. That's the one I believe it is. So in the description of that video, there should be a link to that combat reference sheet. Okay. Yeah, the Suede Combat Survival Guide, I think is what it is. Although I don't think I have it as a Excel file. I think I have it as a PDF. I think it says a PDF somewhere. But there's a couple of nice sheets out there that you can get. Yeah, look for Suede Combat Survival Guide. That's going to be the biggest one. There's going to be some different versions out there. Originally, it was just like one page, and then it's kind of expanded to, I think, like 4 or 5 pages now, for having different things for like casting or for powers. And I think there's a section for vehicles as well and chases. But the main PC one's that first page that has all different options on it and how you can use different options in different situations to overcome whatever obstacle you're trying to overcome. Cool. All right, I guess this is a little bit of a shorter stream, but I'm glad I was able to talk about this particular topic. And I think that I'm hoping that this will help people who are constantly concerned about balance in the game understand that Savage Worlds really just does not care about balance. I mean, there's an extent where you can say, yeah, it's like there's certain monsters that are very strong. If you go watch Pete Sloom and I's video about dragon encounters, dragons are extremely strong. But you also see a lot of comments from other people saying, yeah, but if you have dragons, if they only have one dragon, it's bad action economy for the dragon or what have you. But yes, so there's going to be some level of common sense as far as like certain abilities maybe being too strong for characters, but at the same time, for the most part, Savage really doesn't care. Just focus on the narrative, focus on what makes sense for the characters and for your NPCs and your enemies, and just kind of go with that. Because I think the imbalance of, I think the word is in for imbalance, because when I did the unbalance versus imbalance, unbalance assumes that something is supposed to be balanced and then became unbalanced. Imbalance assumes that the thing is inherently not balanced. And I think that's maybe more accurate for Savage Worlds, that it is inherently not balanced, and that makes it more fun. So keep that in mind. I hope that makes you guys enjoy your Savage Worlds game a little bit more and lets you worry a little bit less. And with that, I'm going to say goodnight. So stay savage, everybody, and may you be the wild card of your own story. Cheers.